Hi, I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I've been with my girlfriend, Emily 25F, for 3 years. She's amazing, kind, smart, funny, and we've been pretty solid as a couple. She's met my family multiple times over the years, and things seemed fine, but this Christmas has turned into something straight out of a family drama series. Let me give you some context. My dad has hosted Christmas every year for as long as I can remember. It's not a casual thing, it's a big event. We're talking about a huge tree, enough food to feed an army, and every single family member crammed into the living room for presents and games. It's the kind of thing where partners and kids are always welcome, no exceptions. My dad takes a lot of pride in this tradition, and we've always made it work, no matter what was happening in our lives. Enter Chris, my older brother. He's 30 and basically the golden child of the family. You know the type, straight as in school, great career, always the one my parents brag about to their friends. He's also the kind of person who has to be in control of every situation. I've dealt with it my whole life, but Emily hasn't had as much practice. From the first time they met, Chris was cold to her. Not outright rude, but dismissive. He'd cut her off in conversations or act like her opinions didn't matter. At one point, he even made a comment that she was too opinionated after she joined in a discussion about politics during dinner. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, I got a call from my dad, and at first I thought it was just the usual holiday prep stuff. You know, who's bringing what dish, what time to show up, that kind of thing. But then he dropped a bombshell: Emily isn't welcome this year. He didn't even try to sugarcoat it. He just said, Chris doesn't approve of her, and it's causing too much tension. It's best if she doesn't come. I was floored. I asked him to explain, but all he would say was that it was for family harmony. I pushed for more, but he shut me down with, it's my house, my rules. Apparently, Chris had gone to him and said he wouldn't come if Emily was there, and rather than standing up to him, Dad decided to side with Chris. I don't think I've ever felt so blindsided. Emily has never done anything to warrant this kind of treatment. She's polite, engaging, and has always made an effort to connect with my family. I told Emily what happened, and while she was clearly hurt, she told me I should go to Christmas without her. She said she didn't want to be the reason I missed out on family time, but honestly, how could I just leave her behind like that? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Chris has always had this way of manipulating situations to get what he wants, and now he's managed to weaponize Christmas. I reached out to my mom, who's divorced from my dad, and told her what was going on. She was livid. She said this was classic Chris, creating drama and putting everyone else in the middle. She even offered to host Christmas herself, which was tempting, but I wasn't sure how many people would actually show up if Dad was still holding his event. To make matters worse, word of the drama spread to the rest of the family. My cousins and aunts started gossiping about it, and the opinions were split. Some thought Dad was right to prioritize keeping the peace, while others thought Chris was being ridiculous. One of my cousins reminded me of a time when Chris threw a fit during a family vacation because something didn't go his way, and everyone had to adjust their plans to make him happy. It's like this has been building up for years, and now it's all coming to a head. I tried reaching out to Chris directly to talk about this, but he just brushed me off. He wouldn't give me a straight answer about why he dislikes Emily. He just said she's not the right fit for the family, whatever that means. It's so frustrating because there's no way to fix something if the other person won't even tell you what's wrong. At this point, I'm completely torn. I don't want to ruin Christmas for everyone, but I also don't want to set the precedent that Chris gets to dictate who's welcome in my life. Emily has been nothing but supportive, but I can see how much this is hurting her. My dad keeps doubling down on his my house, my rules stance, and Chris is acting like he's won some kind of power struggle. Meanwhile, my mom is trying to rally the troops for an alternate celebration, and the family group chat is a minefield. I decided to post about it here to get some outside perspectives. Am I overreacting by considering skipping Christmas altogether? Should I try to push back more, or just let it go for the sake of family peace? At this point, I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I have no idea what to do. Update 1. After my initial post, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of comments came in, and almost all of them said the same thing: stand up for Emily. People were calling my dad a pushover and Chris a textbook example of a controlling sibling. The advice was loud and clear: don't let them dictate my life or relationships. It was both reassuring and a little intimidating. The internet didn't hold back, and while I appreciated the support, I knew this wasn't going to be an easy fix. One comment stuck with me. Someone suggested I call Chris directly and demand a straight answer about why he dislikes Emily. I figured it couldn't hurt to try, so I gave it a shot. The call started awkwardly, but I asked Chris why he had such a problem with Emily, and he gave me the same vague response he's been giving for years: she's just not right for the family. No details, no examples, nothing concrete. It was infuriating. I pressed him further, pointing out that Emily has always been respectful and kind, but Chris doubled down, saying she doesn't fit in. That's when I snapped. I told him he was being selfish and controlling, that he's made this whole situation about him. Instead of responding, he hung up on me. A few minutes later, my dad called, furious. He said I was stirring up drama, and that Chris's attendance at Christmas was more important to the family dynamic than Emily's. It felt like I was talking to a wall. Dad wouldn't budge from his my house, my rules stance, and I hung up more frustrated than ever. Emily, as always, tried to make things easier. She told me again that it was okay if I went without her, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. She was trying so hard to be understanding, but this wasn't fair to her. Meanwhile, my mom called and offered her place for Christmas again. She said we could invite whoever wanted to come, and the idea started to sound more appealing. At least we wouldn't have to deal with Chris and his nonsense. The situation blew up even more when I tried addressing it in the family group chat. I thought maybe if I laid everything out, we could all come to some kind of resolution. Instead, it turned into a disaster. Some family members agreed with me and thought Chris was being unreasonable, while others backed my dad, saying he was just trying to keep the peace. Chris stayed completely silent the entire time, which only made things worse. It felt like I was shouting into a void. Out of nowhere, I got a private message from Chris's girlfriend, Sarah. She said she didn't agree with how Chris was handling things, but she wasn't going to get involved. She told me she thought Emily seemed lovely and didn't understand why Chris had such a problem with her. It was nice to hear someone in his corner wasn't completely on his side, but it didn't change the fact that Chris was still calling the shots. Then came the bombshell. A cousin I'm close with called me and told me that several family members were planning to boycott Dad's Christmas in solidarity with me and Emily. I hadn't asked anyone to do that, but apparently word of Chris's behavior had been spreading. It felt good to know some people had our backs, but it also added to the tension. That same cousin dropped another piece of information that explained a lot. Apparently, Chris had threatened Dad, saying he would cut off financial support if Emily attended Christmas. I didn't even know Dad was financially dependent on Chris, but apparently he's been helping Dad out for years. Suddenly, Dad's refusal to stand up to Chris made a lot more sense. It didn't make it right, but at least it was clearer why he caved so quickly. Meanwhile, Emily's parents invited us to spend Christmas with them instead. They were warm and welcoming, saying they'd love to have both of us if things didn't work out with my family. The idea was tempting, no drama, no Chris, just a normal, happy holiday. Emily said she didn't want to pressure me, but I could tell she'd feel more comfortable there. As the days went on, I started seriously considering skipping Dad's Christmas altogether. The more I thought about it, the less I wanted to spend the holiday in a house where Emily wasn't welcome. But then, out of the blue, Dad called me again. This time, he wasn't angry. He sounded almost desperate. He begged me to reconsider, saying he was just trying to keep the family together and that I shouldn't let this one issue ruin Christmas. I told him I needed more time to think and ended the call. Honestly, I have no idea what to do. On one hand, I want to stand up for Emily and show her that I'm on her side. On the other, skipping Christmas feels like giving Chris exactly what he wants. It's a lose-lose situation, and I'm not sure there's a way to come out of this without someone getting hurt. For now, I'm still weighing my options. I'll update again once I've made a decision. Update 2. I've made my decision. I'm not going to my dad's Christmas. Emily means too much to me, and letting Chris dictate who is or isn't welcome in my life is a line I can't cross. As soon as I told my dad, it was like setting off a bomb. He accused me of ruining Christmas and said I was letting one person destroy the family dynamic. I reminded him that I wasn't the one making ultimatums, but he wouldn't hear it. He ended the call abruptly, clearly furious. Not long after, I heard from one of my cousins that Chris was gloating. Apparently, he'd been telling people that he won, and that I was being childish for skipping Christmas over something so small. It didn't sit right with me, but I wasn't going to engage. The split in the family became even more apparent. Some relatives backed Dad and Chris, saying they just wanted to avoid conflict. Others supported me, saying Chris had been pulling this kind of power play for years, and it was about time someone stood up to him. Meanwhile, I confirmed with my mom that Emily and I would be spending Christmas at her place. Mom was thrilled. She started making plans immediately, promising it would be a stress-free day with good food, plenty of laughs, and none of the drama. When I told Emily, she looked relieved. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we had something to look forward to. A couple of days later, I got another message from Sarah, Chris's girlfriend. This time, she didn't hold back. She told me that Chris's issue with Emily isn't about her personality or anything she's done. It's about the fact that Emily stands up to him. Sarah said Chris has always been the type to surround himself with people who agree with him or let him take charge, and Emily challenges that. According to Sarah, it makes him feel insecure, which is why he's been pushing so hard to exclude her. Things took another turn when I tried to address the situation in the family group chat again. I thought maybe if everyone had more context, it would help. Instead, it backfired spectacularly. Chris finally broke his silence, calling me immature for dragging the family into what he called my relationship drama. That set off a chain reaction of heated messages, and by the end of it, no one was speaking to each other. The group chat went dead, leaving everyone more divided than ever. After that, Dad stopped responding to me altogether. No texts, no calls, just silence. I found out through a sibling that he's been venting to anyone who will listen, saying I'm being unreasonable and selfish. At this point, our relationship feels completely strained, and I'm not sure how we'll recover from this. On the flip side, a few cousins reached out privately to show their support. One of them told me they admired me for standing up to Chris and said they'd always felt pressured to go along with his antics to keep the peace. Another cousin admitted they were considering skipping Dad's Christmas too, saying they didn't want to be part of something so unfair. Meanwhile, my original post on Reddit had gone viral. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with people sharing their own stories of family drama and encouraging me to keep standing my ground. Some even suggested going no contact with my dad and Chris entirely. It was eye-opening to see how many others had dealt with similar situations, and it made me feel less alone. Emily decided to write a letter to my dad. She poured her heart into it, explaining her side of things and expressing a genuine desire to mend fences. She didn't blame anyone, but she made it clear that being excluded had hurt her deeply. A few days later, one of my siblings mentioned that Dad had received the letter. He didn't reply directly but acknowledged it in passing, saying only that he understood her perspective. Then came the kicker. A cousin told me that Chris had been spreading rumors about Emily to justify his dislike of her. He'd apparently been telling people that she was rude and disrespectful during family gatherings, which couldn't be further from the truth. It was infuriating to know he was trying to rewrite history to make himself look better. The Reddit community weighed in again after I posted this update. The advice was clear: boundaries are necessary, and sometimes cutting ties, at least temporarily, is the healthiest option. It was validating to see so many people agree that I wasn't overreacting. Even with all the support, though, this situation has been exhausting. The family division feels permanent, and I'm not sure what the future holds for my relationship with my dad or Chris. For now, I'm focusing on the Christmas we'll have with my mom. It's the one bright spot in this whole mess, and I'm determined to make it a day to remember for all the right reasons. I'll keep updating as things unfold, but for now, I'm taking things one step at a time. Update 3. A week before Christmas, I got a call from my dad. It caught me off guard because he'd been silent since I told him I wasn't coming. This time, his tone was calmer. He asked me to reconsider and come to Christmas, but only if I left Emily out of it. He claimed he was trying to fix things, but when I asked if he'd uninvite Chris, he flat out refused. It was clear nothing had changed. I told him I wasn't going to budge either. If Emily wasn't welcome, neither was I. With that settled, my mom decided to step things up. She'd originally planned a small gathering, but after hearing about all the family drama, she decided to make her Christmas event bigger. She extended invites to everyone, including Dad and Chris, even though we all knew they wouldn't come. To my surprise, several cousins and a couple of aunts and uncles RSVP'd to her event instead of Dad's. It felt like the tide was starting to turn. Then, a cousin dropped another piece of the puzzle into my lap. They told me Chris had been complaining about Emily's attitude since the very first time they met. Apparently, he was upset because Emily didn't immediately agree with his opinions during a family debate. The topic? Something minor about a holiday movie, of all things. From that moment on, Chris decided she was too difficult. It was such a petty reason, but it explained why he'd been hostile to her for so long. The next twist came from Sarah, Chris's girlfriend. She went public. She posted a long Facebook status defending Emily and calling out Chris for being intimidated by strong women. She wrote about how Chris always tried to control conversations and shut down anyone who disagreed with him, and how Emily standing her ground had made him feel insecure. Sarah's post was shared by a couple of relatives, and it caused a ripple effect within the family. Some people praised her for speaking up, while others thought she was adding fuel to the fire. As the days went by, the family divisions became more apparent. Relatives started voicing their opinions more openly. Some criticized Chris for being controlling, while others blamed me for creating drama by refusing to compromise. It was exhausting to keep up with, but at least it was clear who supported us and who didn't. Around this time, another cousin confirmed something that had been floating around: Dad's financial dependency on Chris. Apparently, Chris had been helping Dad out with money for years, which explained why Dad was so reluctant to challenge him. It also made me realize just how deep Chris's manipulation went. He wasn't just holding the family dynamic hostage, he was also using financial leverage to keep Dad on his side. Frustrated by all of this, I confronted Dad again. This time, I didn't hold back. I demanded to know why he was enabling Chris and letting him control everything. Dad finally broke down and admitted he felt trapped. He said he couldn't afford to lose Chris's support, and that's why he'd caved to his ultimatum. Hearing this didn't make me any less angry, but at least I understood where Dad was coming from. It didn't excuse his actions, though. Meanwhile, Emily continued to be a rock. She stayed supportive, urging me to focus on what would make us happy instead of trying to fix the unfixable. Her perspective helped ground me, especially as the drama escalated further. A cousin told me Chris had made a snide comment about how he always knew I'd cave under pressure. It was infuriating, but instead of reacting, I focused on planning a great holiday with Mom and Emily. As word spread about what was happening, more cousins reached out privately. A few apologized for not speaking up sooner, saying they'd always felt Chris's behavior was out of line, but didn't want to cause waves. Their support meant a lot, and it gave me hope that things might not be as one-sided as they'd seemed. By this point, my second Reddit post had gone viral. The comments were even more intense than before, with thousands of people urging me to set firm boundaries with my dad and Chris. Some even suggested cutting ties entirely. It was overwhelming, but also validating to see so many strangers agree that I wasn't overreacting. With all the pieces in place, I made an official announcement. I told the family that Emily and I would be spending Christmas at Mom's and that anyone who wanted to join us was welcome. A handful of relatives confirmed they'd be there, while others stayed silent. Chris retaliated by sending a group message accusing me of tearing the family apart. He blamed me for dividing everyone and ruining the holiday plans. The message was long and dramatic, but I ignored it. Now, with Christmas just around the corner, things feel tense but manageable. The family is divided, Chris is doubling down, and Dad is caught in the middle. I don't know what the fallout will look like after the holidays, but one thing is certain: I'm standing by Emily no matter what. I'll update again after Christmas. There's a good chance things will come to a head, especially if Chris keeps pushing. Stay tuned. Update 4. Christmas Eve started with a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it to see my dad standing there, I was stunned. He looked tired, like the weight of the past few weeks had finally caught up to him. He stepped inside and began to apologize. He said he was sorry for how things had unfolded but didn't offer any solutions. Emily's name came up, but when I asked if he was here to uninvite Chris and welcome her, he hesitated. Instead, he repeated that he was stuck, that he couldn't afford to lose Chris's financial support. For the first time, I saw my dad for what he was: trapped and ashamed. He admitted that he hated the situation and felt like he'd let everyone down. Before I could say much, Emily joined us. She didn't seem angry, just calm. She told my dad that she understood why he felt torn but also stressed the importance of mutual respect. She wasn't pushy or demanding, just genuine. I think it caught him off guard because he grew quiet, nodding along as she spoke. That conversation didn't end with a resolution, but it felt like a small step forward. My dad left shortly after, promising to think about things. I could tell Emily's words had gotten to him, but whether it would change anything remained to be seen. Meanwhile, back at Dad's house, things were reaching a boiling point. From what I heard later, the Christmas gathering had started as expected, festive but tense. Chris was in his element, acting like the host and chatting with everyone. But then Sarah, his girlfriend, spoke up. Apparently she was talking to a relative and mentioned that she thought Emily had always been polite and didn't understand why there was so much drama. Chris overheard and lost it. He accused her of betraying him, making a scene in front of everyone. Sarah didn't back down. She told Chris that she was tired of his toxic attitude and controlling behavior. In front of the entire family, she announced that their relationship was over and walked out. Chris stormed off after her, slamming a door on his way out. The party pretty much fell apart after that. A few family members left, some angry and others just exhausted by the drama. Back at my mom's, things couldn't have been more different. We had a peaceful, joyful Christmas Eve. Emily and I spent the day cooking with my mom, laughing with cousins who had chosen to join us, and just enjoying the kind of holiday I'd been hoping for all along. There was no tension, no arguments, just warmth and happiness. It was the first time in weeks that I felt like things might actually turn out okay. On Christmas morning, more fallout from Dad's house trickled in. A few family members who'd been at his gathering the night before called to say they were coming to Mom's instead. They said they'd had enough of Chris's antics and didn't want to spend the day in a tense environment. By the afternoon, we had a full house with relatives laughing, sharing stories, and passing around plates of food. It was everything I'd wanted for the holiday, and I could see how much it meant to Emily too. Later that night, my dad called. He sounded different, quieter, almost reflective. He told me he was starting to realize just how much damage Chris's behavior had caused over the years. He didn't apologize outright, but he admitted he needed to reevaluate some things. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Emily, always the bigger person, decided to write him another letter. She thanked him for coming to see us on Christmas Eve and for being willing to reflect on everything that had happened. She didn't sugarcoat her feelings, but focused on hope for the future. My dad didn't respond directly, but one of my siblings told me he'd read it multiple times. Meanwhile, Sarah's decision to break up with Chris had ripple effects across the family. Her Facebook post about the breakup went viral within our circle, and more relatives started speaking up about their own frustrations with Chris. A cousin shared a story about how Chris had once manipulated a family vacation to exclude another relative, showing a clear pattern of controlling behavior. It seemed like Chris was finally losing his grip on the family. The biggest surprise came from my dad. A few days after Christmas, he called again and admitted he was considering setting boundaries with Chris. He didn't know how to start, but the fact that he was even entertaining the idea was huge. On the other side of things, Emily's parents extended an invitation for us to spend future holidays with them if we ever needed a drama-free space. They even offered to host a joint holiday with both families, saying they'd love to help bridge the gap. It felt good to have that kind of support. As things stand now, I'm hopeful. Rebuilding trust with my dad will take time, and I don't know what my relationship with Chris will look like going forward, but for the first time in a while, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. The Reddit community has been incredible throughout all of this, and I can't thank everyone enough for their advice and encouragement. I'll keep you updated if anything major happens, but for now, I'm focusing on the positives and taking things one step at a time. Update 5. The dust has finally settled after what has been the most dramatic holiday season of my life. Now that I've had time to reflect, I feel validated in my decision to skip Christmas at my dad's. Spending the holiday at my mom's house was everything we needed, peaceful, happy, and free of all the tension that had been building for weeks. While we enjoyed good food and great company, things were falling apart at Dad's gathering. From what I've heard, Chris's outburst and Sarah's breakup with him left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. Chris has always thrived on control, but this time, it backfired. His behavior at Christmas has left him increasingly isolated. A few cousins told me they're done putting up with his antics, and even some of his usual defenders have started to distance themselves. He's no longer the golden child everyone rallies around. Instead, he's become the guy everyone's wary of, and it's clear he doesn't know how to handle that. The biggest surprise came from my dad. A week after Christmas, he called me again, but this time the conversation was different. He told me he started therapy. He said he's realized how much he's been relying on Chris, not just financially but emotionally, and that it's caused him to make decisions he regrets. He admitted he's afraid of conflict, and that it's something he needs to work on. Hearing this was huge. For so long, I felt like my dad was blind to Chris's manipulation, but now it feels like he's finally starting to see the bigger picture. Dad also asked to meet Emily for coffee. He said he wanted to talk to her one-on-one and start rebuilding their relationship. I checked with Emily, and she agreed. They met a few days later, and while I wasn't there, Emily told me afterward that the conversation went well. Dad apologized to her directly and said he hoped they could move forward. It's a small step, but it means a lot. As for Chris, he sent me a text. It was one of those half-hearted apologies that didn't really take responsibility for anything. He blamed the entire situation on misunderstandings and said he hoped we could move past it. I didn't respond. At this point, it feels like anything I say would just give him another opportunity to twist the narrative. Emily has been incredibly strong through all of this. She told me she supports whatever decisions I make about my family, but she made it clear she won't compromise her self-respect to appease Chris. It's something I respect so much about her. She knows her worth and doesn't let people treat her unfairly. Seeing her stand her ground has only reinforced my decision to prioritize her and our relationship. The family dynamics have shifted in ways I didn't expect. Relatives who used to brush off Chris's behavior are now reaching out to me and Emily, inviting us to future family events without him. Some have even apologized for not standing up to him sooner. It's like the scales have finally tipped, and more people are starting to see him for who he really is. Chris, on the other hand, has taken to social media to vent. He's been posting vague statuses about being abandoned by his family and how people always choose sides without knowing the full story. From what I've seen, he's not getting much sympathy. Most people seem to be ignoring him, which is probably driving him even crazier. Dad has continued making progress. He attended a family meeting my mom hosted to discuss the holidays and the way things unfolded. He apologized to everyone, including Emily, for his part in the drama and said he's committed to doing better. It's clear he still has a long way to go, but the fact that he's taking these steps is more than I ever expected. Looking ahead, Emily and I have decided to start our own holiday tradition. Next year, we're hosting Christmas at our place. We're inviting both families, but with one condition: everyone has to be respectful. If they can't manage that, they're not welcome. It feels like the best way to move forward, celebrating with the people who support us and setting boundaries with those who don't. Sarah, Chris's ex, reached out to me recently. She wanted to thank me for being honest about my experiences with Chris because it helped her realize she wasn't alone. She said breaking up with him was the best decision she's ever made, and she's already feeling better about her future. Hearing that made me feel even more certain about the path I've taken. My latest Reddit update went viral again, with thousands of people chiming in to celebrate the progress we've made. The support has been overwhelming, and it's reminded me just how many people deal with similar family dynamics. If sharing my story helps even one person feel less alone, then it's been worth it. As for Chris, I've heard through the grapevine that he's planning to move out of state. Apparently, he's hoping for a fresh start, which is probably for the best. His departure has left the family with mixed feelings, some relief, some lingering resentment, but at least it's given us all a chance to breathe. Through all of this, Emily has become even closer to the supportive members of my family. They've welcomed her with open arms, and it's been incredible to see her carve out her own place in the group. She's not just my girlfriend anymore, she's family. To everyone who's followed along and offered advice, thank you.